3.14 introduces a new HUD for ships. It replaces the older jet fighter styled HUD for one that is much wider and providing of information that was previously missing. Players coming from Elite Dangerous could mistakenly accept this feature release as final and argue their preference on the matter. Personally, I was a little nervous, cause I don't like it. After a bit of digging though, and talking with more established Star citizens, I was educated on the fact that this is only a first iteration of the new building block system, also known as Canvas Slice. It is meant to provide the means for layering UI elements inside of the cockpit as holograms instead of rendering them in a 2D space projecting in the distance. You also explained that the way Star Citizen typically develops is that they introduce the foundation for a new system, making sure it works before making sure it looks pretty. And that's cool. It reassures me that this system will see a ton of updates in the future. Beyond unique HUDs per ship make, there's talk of things like customizable elements, etc. The new HUD currently in-game is designed for the Aegis ships, and like I mentioned, I don't like it. There's another version showcased in one of the Inside Star Citizen videos that shows a much more refined design that actually looks good, and I'm currently left wondering where exactly this is going. Is the UI currently in-game closer to the finished product, or is it more a placeholder building block until the final designs are ready? In either case, here's my opinion on what is currently in-game, which I'll also write out in a TLDR for CIG to use as feedback. And this is definitely meant as constructive criticism, just my 2 cents if you will on what I personally enjoy. After talking to various people, I'm aware as well that some people really like the current design. For me, it looks more like a temporary proof of concept rather than a finished product, and if my feedback can help design the final product, that's great. Let's talk about the positioning first of all. From a 2D perspective, it is hard to tell, but the UI is placed incredibly close to the face. And this is fine typically for monitor gameplay, but I'm concerned for future VR support. I urge CIG to not make the same mistake as Elite Dangerous, where floating holograms are placed only to look good on a monitor. Best to get their spacing right from the get-go. Place them closer to the windshields, make them large enough to read, and avoid having issues with their placement close to the face later on. This will mean that the placement is dependent on the ship, considering that the windows are in different locations for each ship. And I hope this isn't the reason why they opted for placement so close to the face, because that would be a real shame. I believe the old HUD was placed farther back already, if not rendered in 2D space like a traditional jet fighter HUD. And as a final remark, I just wanted to add as well that I think if somebody is looking over your shoulder and sees a HUD that close to your face, it kinda looks dumb. Sorta like someone driving a car and pulling their chair up really close to the steering wheel. Now to talk about the design then, the new HUD is very wide, and personally I enjoy a more minimalistic approach. I prefer a lot of clear view out of the window, minimal distraction. There's a lot of lines that clutter the screen. I'd call these pointless and distracting personally. Some of the lines have a depth to them that when you speed up, they also function as a vector indicator for speed and direction. And some might like these of course, but for me they're just clutter. So having the option to turn them off would be really nice. Again, this is why I liked the original HUD so much. It was a simple square aiming to give you all you need in a compact area in the center. On the right side we see the fuel indicators that are now only a vertical graph bar. They lost their digits, which I find a shame. If I had to choose, I'd choose for them to look more like the noise and decoy boxes, offering a horizontal bar and of course the digits. I noticed as well that when you turn off the engines, the bars stop functioning, so where you previously could see the digits increasing when your ship was being refueled with the engines off, currently you cannot. I'd really prefer to be able to see my fuel status while the engines are off as well. Having to turn the engines on just to see how much fuel you have is kinda weird. I am aware though that there are currently some issues with enabling and disabling power. For example, the fact that this new HUD layout is becoming so much more of a thing, it shows so much more information, I would suggest that maybe it should actually be invisible when the power is off and turn on with the rest of the MFDs. Food for thought for sure. Staying on the right side, we now have weapon information. And this is a welcome addition for combat, as there was a particular absence of information here before. I have to say though, it takes up so much space. Very large boxes that cannot be hidden at all. Powering them off or changing their fire group only makes them red or displaces them to the side a little bit. As an explorer, cargo pilot or racer or anyone else with a preference, it would be a welcome addition if there was a choice to hide these. Again, I prefer having more of a clear view out of the window as opposed to all these boxes cluttering the view when I don't need them. Oh, and on a side note, when you have enough weapons, they currently overlap the fuel indicators as well, which is unfortunate. Okay, a look at the left side then. I really loved the old circular throttle indicator. I thought it was a really fancy way to show you how much thruster power you're utilizing. Though, because it is just that, a thruster usage indicator, it didn't take up too much space. The new one is just a big vertical bar, which just takes up a ton of vertical space and it doesn't really need to. Shoving the boost bar, for example, farther out of the side and more out into the peripheral? Sad times, in my opinion. In general, I think all of the indicator squares for fuel, gear, coupled mode, VTOL, they take up so much space compared to the old version where they were practically placed in a list with a little dot next to it. They really feel like placeholder squares as well, and again, it makes me hope that this version we're seeing now is just a sort of proof of concept HUD demonstrating the functionality and is lacking all sorts of design. Even in the other design that I showed you that was more refined, it looked a lot neater and smaller and not so OTT big squares. I guess I sort of feel like the design of this HUD looks more like a fan project rather than a finished design by CIG. Which again, would make sense if this is just a proof of concept. Now, we have a new heading indicator, which is awesome. I'm glad to have it. What's irritating though is that it functions like one of those spherical compasses in an aeroplane. It's inverted. When you move left, the bar goes right. It feels counterintuitive. Most games do this the right way, so that would mean that if I yaw right in my ship, then the bar would move in the same direction, to the right. Let's say if we're talking about numbers, if I'm heading 100, then heading 105 would be displayed on the right side, and 110 on the right of that, and 115 on the right of that. But currently it's inverted, so it's a little strange. I have to say as well that I think the speed and altitude ladders feel less intuitive now than they used to. The way these are set up with the scrolling speed and altitudes, so many digits, there's just so much happening on the screen. Personally, I liked the more simplistic HUD, again, where there was just a simple bar increasing or decreasing in size, without any digits scrolling across the screen. It just feels like a lot of fluff, very distracting fluff. The way the speed limiter is set as well with this little square, it's very inaccurate and just, again, takes up so much space. I think it's unnecessary. Just a little line the way it used to was plenty. I've noticed that these bars all exist in space as well, which confuses me, not just on a planet. I guess for larger ships this might be useful when calling out heading and pitch to find people that aren't on your radar, but during fast-paced combat or racing or exploration, to me they feel like unnecessary elements to clutter and obstruct the view outside. I don't need to see my heading or pitch when I'm in space. It feels a little bit too much. Now we have these 3 new bars at the top of the screen that display all the different emissions to indicate whether you can be detected or not, and I think these are cool, but personally I think they look very gamey. There are no text indicators to tell you which is which, and in my opinion, missing labels is never a good idea. Just look at Elite Dangerous's system map as an example. All the new icons we got there and you never know which is which exactly. So I think it would be nice for these to get some indicators like the fuel and coupled mode and things like that. And I would also really like to see some digits instead of just a graphical bar. Currently I don't really know where I am with this little bar, and again I think it would be a welcome addition to see the numbers. Now then, to talk about the Planetary pitch ladder, it itself has changed, and while this is a welcome change that it is now part of the same HUD and not a simple 2D overlay anymore, I think it could do with some work. The digits are smaller than the rest of the UI, and for me personally, just a little bit too small to read at first glance. I've also noticed that because of its positioning, it tends to fade out the top parts above the crosshair, so sometimes you can only read one horizontal level of pitch above the crosshair and sometimes none at all, while below the crosshair there is much more space to display 2 or even 3 levels. I wanted to mention the vector indicator again as well. This one is a personal favorite of mine, and I don't like the way it fades out completely now when near the center of the HUD. I personally would want it completely opaque at all times and not fade out at all. It would be really nice if this were an option. Again, I always say the more options the better. Currently, when flying almost in line with the crosshair, the fact that the vector indicator is hidden takes away the most important visual cue that you're drifting a little bit, and I'm left guessing again the way I do in Elite Dangerous. Please, let's get that vector indicator more visible again. With the current iteration of the new HUD tech, we see a few elements remain that use the old HUD system still as well. The weapon system, gimbal indicators, and of course the vector indicator. They kind of feel out of place, and I imagine they still need some work. Finally then, with the new stealth and detection mechanics, when flying around space stations, you get a constant spam of new target detected in the form of white flashes that spawn at your crosshair and then move to their respective locations. Very annoying, and surely something they're working on, but I thought I would mention it anyway. Now, I'm convinced this is all a massive work in progress though, of course. So there it is, my first 2 cents of hopefully constructive criticism into one of the systems that I think is very important to the success of Star Citizen, and I definitely look forward to what CIG comes up with next in the future. Hopefully they consider the fans of minimalistic UI.